Welcome to Overcoming the Limits video and podcast series where we interview extraordinary people and dig into their psychology, their motivation, and their journey. My name is Trevor, and I am here to ignite inspiration inside of each and every one of you listening and watching today. Today, we have Mikael.
Hello.
Thank you for being here. This is really cool.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
You are so patient also. This is a big learning curve here. Don't have Jake, the sound engineer, so it took me a little bit to get set up, so I'm always appreciative of your patience. You have a really good energy to you.
Thank you.
Have you heard that? You had to have heard that from somebody before, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, anytime I talk to people about you, they say positive things. And I hope that just always continues for you, because what an awesome thing is when people think of you, you make them smile, you make them happy. How does that make you feel knowing that?
I mean, why not?
Yeah.
Yeah, why not? I mean, that's everything that I believe in. I think happiness is kind of our natural state, and we just kind of lose it and obscure it when we get stressed out, etc. It just is something that happens. So I try to just revert and fall to my natural place, which I think is happiness for me. And I also feel like grief is part of happiness in one sense. Grief and sadness, I think they're emotionally linked for me in my experience. So that's, I don't know, it's warming. To me, it's warming because I've had people that I'm playing music on the mountain and they just start crying.
Oh, I imagine so. Yeah. I mean, I've heard you play, and it's just really been an emotional moment to hear. You are so talented. By the way, Mikael is probably most known for the musician at the top of the incline. He plays this beautiful, I would say, folksy style music, and talk about talent. You are very talented. Just the moment you were tuning your guitar, and I was just blown away because it was it was so good.
Thank you.
What does music mean to you? Why is it that every day you're up there playing music, or at least every day I've seen?
Yeah, I'm only gonna I'm only gonna be on the incline with the guitar with Charlie. Charlie along.
Is that your name?
That's the name of the guitar. Charlie's gonna be along anywhere I go. Even yesterday, I didn't play at all. I played nothing, but you just bring Charlie along. Absolutely. So that's 100% why I'm on the mountain. It's the music, and it's the place that I've played all over, but the mountain's a place where the music seems at home. Like I feel like I'm a part of everything. So it belongs, and that's important to me. And it's great to bring it away from the mountain too. But yeah, my motivations, it just kind of has to happen. I'm just at a point in my life where it just has to happen.
I love that. So do you feel different when you're at the top of the incline playing your music versus maybe in your living room? Is there an experience difference for you, or does it kind of take you to the same place? Music just gets you in that sense.
There's an experience. There's a different in experience, and there's not a better than worse than. They're both different experiences. So I really enjoy playing in enclosed space because it's not normal. And I think what's challenging about the incline and playing out in an open area is the sound just travels. It just goes and goes and goes, and there's nothing to reflect it back at you. And I like that because it's a little more challenging for me, and that's what I want. I want a challenging environment to play in, and then it's just great, inspirational. It's clear. Everything's clear.
So do you feel like music is just a part of you and it has to come out, or like what does it mean to you to play that guitar, Charlie, right there?
I feel like I am the instrument. That'd be the best expression. I'm the instrument, the music's something I can hear. So the music is something I'm being taught. And I've always felt that way. I've never been able to express it quite correctly. So people sometimes make requests. Say, can you play this? Can you play something by this artist? And that's just impossible for me. I don't really have any. It just doesn't work. It's like there's no current. There's no electrical wiring for me to play someone else's music. And it's just, I can hear it, and that's another thing. It doesn't really feel like my music. It feels like a music that I can hear, a music that I can tune into. And that's strengthened this last year. I've been working for a year on 2 albums. The first album's called Apocryphy, and the second album's called Revolutions. And there's 9 tracks on Apocryphy and 10 tracks on Revolutions. And there's quite a lot of music. I think it's probably 5 to 15 minutes song length for a song, and generally closer to 15.
I do remember when you showed me, I think it was Mercury, which is that your first album?
That's off the second album.
The second one. So you showed me that a few weeks ago, and it must have been 9 minutes or so, and it was beautiful. And an interesting thing about your music, I don't know if it's present in all of your songs, but at least that one, you have this own language that you're speaking.
Yeah.
And do you do that in all of your songs?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So how did you discover or create this new language that you sing in? Because it's beautiful. It really is.
It's more of a discovery, and I don't really feel like it's new. I don't know if it's old either. I don't think I'd put it either way. I feel like it's a fully existing, fully formed language, and I'm just tuning into it. That's the way I experience it. But then I can watch, because it just takes your brain quite a long time to learn a language, especially when you're not immersed. And I think I am immersed as much as I can be in the language. But yeah, it feels like it's a spoken language. I have no idea where it's spoken.
You're the only one that you know of that speaks it?
I don't even know the name of this language.
Okay. It's just this natural language that has come to you.
But it feels like it's placed. Like there's a place that it's from. And it feels like there's a people who are speaking in the now.
So when you're singing your songs in this language, is every song the same wording?
It's same language, absolutely same language.
Same language, but do the words or does it flow differently each time you sing a song?
I don't think so. I think it's more of a learning curve of just polishing. As I've polished the vocals, there's just there's phrasing. It's just learning the phrasing, because it's for me, it's a birth. Like it's the birthing of a language. And children do this automatically. Like they just automatically learn languages like this.
That's a good point. There's a lot of languages in this world. And
yeah,
I mean, children can pick up any one of depending on where you are in the world.
Yeah.
You could have learned any language.
Humans are remarkably good at language. I mean, it's our strong suit for certain. And so I think that the big thing has just been the bravery of myself just letting it happen, because there's so many times I've wanted to try to find a way to sing in English, but then there's just, I don't feel like there's words to capture what I'm saying. I just can't say what I need to say in English. It just doesn't have. It's just not there. It's just not my native language. That's I think what I've come to. It's just not my native language. And so I need to speak in my native tongue. That's it. And you just kind of know your native tongue. And I think that's
interesting.
Probably unusual for human beings that I've met. But that's kind of how I've always felt in one sense.
I think it's an interesting outlook for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's atypical thinking. Typically people would say, "Oh, I'm speaking English. That's my first and only language that I know." But you're describing something that's more natural, something that's just more innate and inside you. So let's jump to, I want to kind of revisit the first time we met, because that's kind of an interesting story. Do you remember that day?
I do.
I think it was about a year ago, a year and a half ago.
Over a year.
Mm-hmm. And I must have been 5 miles into the forest on some side trail that I've never seen another person on. I was hiking with my brother. We had just finished camping. We were backcountry camping. We went up Bar Trail, and then we took a side trail, and we were way back there. And we were just leaving for the morning, and there you are, trotting along the trail, and you pass right by us, and I go, hey, I've never seen somebody back here before. And then you're like, oh, and then at a certain point, I think you turned around, and you're like, did you say you've never seen anybody back here? Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, this is not Bar Trail. And I think you were headed to the summit or
Yeah.
Bar Camp.
That was my virgin voyage, shall we say.
So I caught you on your
Yeah.
very first hike experience of Bar Trail.
Yeah, I'd never been up there.
And probably saved you a lot of turned around mileage because that trail goes pretty far, the one that I was on.
Yeah, I've been down it quite a ways. It goes all the way down to it goes right along Ruxton.
Have you ever gone you walked along that pipeline, the pipeline bridge?
I've been out there a little ways. I didn't go. I made it to the bridge. I definitely made it to the bridge, but it kind of felt like the trail was losing energy.
Okay.
It felt like it was I could feel it dispersing, where people are just moving in different directions. You know.
My personal opinion is once you pass that bridge, that's when it really changes because you're off trail at that point.
Yeah.
And there's a place called Dark Canyon back there. Mm-hmm. And that is my absolute favorite place in all of that.
Yeah.
So if you haven't been to Dark Canyon, you really should enjoy that. It's like a beautiful, it's called Dark Canyon, but it's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Okay. I really enjoy it back there.
I haven't been back there. I just know the land enough to know where it is.
You should try it. There's this rock in the middle of this meadow, and you're surrounded by like a waterfall, and there's this beautiful tall canyon walls and trees, aspen groves. The biggest aspen grove I've ever been in is back there. Yeah. And those trees are so thick. And you know that you're off away from the tourists when the aspen trees don't have initials carved in it and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
And all you see the only thing carved in those aspen trees you see are like bear claw marks.
Yeah.
And like you see elk poop back there, a lot of scat. So I've found a bear den back there too, smelled them, and then I was able to get out pretty quick once I realized I wasn't alone. Lots of bear activity back there and elk. I've seen a few elk back there too. And if you haven't seen an elk, have you seen one in the Pike National Forest?
I've yet to see an elk.
I got really lucky. This was only the first or second time I've seen one in this forest, and they are a lot larger than I thought.
Yeah.
And they can run up a mountain extremely fast.
Yeah.
I spooked it because I turned a corner and it was right there, and it ran up this, it's steeper than the incline elevation, and I just saw the trees moving all the way up, 1,000-foot gain, and it went fast.
Yeah.
Like as fast as I could point my finger, the thing was running.
Yeah, they're strong.
They really are. So that it's that kind of atmosphere back there when you pass the bridge. Mm-hmm. I really love it back there. So that day, what was going on for you that first day we met? Because you said it was your first hike on Bar Trail. What brought you to Bar Trail? What was your mission? Why were you there?
I'd been down in town, and when you're in the Springs, there's an illusion that happens where the mountain seems close because it's just towering. It's so towering that it just dominates everything. It doesn't feel that way in Manitou. In Manitou, Rocky Mountain, or Telequin is what I call it, that's the major force. The major force in Manitou is Telequin. And that's the mountain the incline is on. So that's the mountain you feel the most strongly in Manitou. But back in the Springs, you're further back. And we just arrived from Iowa, and it was just like, I want to get onto that mountain. Absolutely. Just want to get onto that mountain. So
you said so it's you and your two children?
And my two children and my former partner, domestic partner at this point, Christine. And we had arrived, and it was to a state, the first chance to really break loose and get into the woods, and it just like the dam burst. So it was like a rocket behind me, and I'd left at 4:00, And the day before, it was just like magnetism. I went the day before. I knew absolutely nothing about anything. And I saw the signage at the base of bar camp talking about the trail. And the signage said it was 13.5 miles. And the magnitude of what it was started to hit me. I was like, oh, it's really quite an undertaking.
And the elevation gain too.
It's 7,000 some feet. Yeah,
it's hard to find that anywhere in the country where you start at 6,000, you end at 13,000. That's just so much gain.
But they had a specific thing written on the sign that said unexperienced hikers plan to do it in 2 days. And that was something that was like, okay. And so I packed for that. I went back to the house, packed for that, and then just, took off up Bar Trail. And it was 4 o'clock in the morning that I left, around 4 o'clock in the morning. And so it was dark, and I missed it. I missed the switch back at 1800, and I didn't know anything about the incline. And so I got to the incline, and
instead of taking that really sharp left turn, you went straight along
well,
the
it
fence
was
line.
dark. It was just black. It was. I mean, the stars were out, but it was like a new moon, so there wasn't really anything to see, and I didn't have a light.
So you ended up on the stairs.
Well, and then I think I tricked myself because there was doubt. There was doubt in my mind, but I was like, well, it kind of seems like maybe these things run together for a while, and I'd never been on the incline either, so I didn't know where the top was. So I did have that false summit thing going. It's like, it doesn't look too far.
This is right there.
So I ended up with this monstrous pack on, like crawling up the Manitou Incline. That was the first time I was on the incline, just right there at 1800, just crawling up the thing, gasping for breath. Because I've been there for 3 weeks. Yeah, around 3 weeks. So yeah, I'm gasping for breath, and
you came from Iowa.
Iowa. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely a big difference in elevation.
It's like 900 feet above sea level in Iowa, I think around 900. It's pretty low.
So, can we talk a little bit about your family? You mentioned you have 2 kids. But there's also a little bit of, I would consider it trauma, a really hard moment with your firstborn you told me about recently. Can you tell us what that experience was like?
Absolutely. My first child was born in 2011. Christine and I had let's think, we'd been briefly almost a year that we were married. And my first child was born and he had complications. And the complications were, it was a normal pregnancy. Everything was fairly standard, healthy, really healthy, beautiful. I look back at that time, it was just so beautiful. Christine was swimming all the time. She was just radiant, just awesome. It was an awesome experience of pregnancy. And when it came time for the baby to be born, as the baby was entering the birth canal and moving down into that stage, with the heart tones, we were monitoring heart tones, and the heart tones started to drop, and which meant that there's a complication as far as the umbilical cord was basically compromised. And unfortunately, there's nothing you can do, as you basically just have to get the baby out by pushing the baby out. So he lost, his heart tones just dwindled and dwindled, and he lost his oxygen and blood supply more or less when he was in that process. So when he was born, it was like a vacuum-assisted delivery, and it was very traumatic. Absolutely traumatic, and you're just breathing and trying to stay calm. But I remember when they laid him right on Christine's chest, and I've never seen a human being that color. It was like gray-green, and my first feeling was, he's dead. It was just like that, because he was not very alive. He did have a heartbeat, and they were able to resuscitate him. And so the condition is called like hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. I can never say the last one right, but it more or less resolves. It's just global damage to all the organs. He had heart damage. He had everything, just damage to his whole body.
From that hypoxic experience.
Because you're just deprived. All your whole system is just deprived from oxygen, blood supply. Those two things. So it's really a miracle that he survived. He was just kind of on that I've always thought of him as an in-between person. He's just a person that was just kind of in between two worlds. So we spent a month at the hospital in Des Moines.
Well, real quick, before we get to 1 month old.
Yeah.
I feel for you. I felt tears come into my eyes, you telling that story. And I just can't imagine being a first-time dad, young man.
Yeah.
So many expectations or ideas or hopes and aspirations. Yeah. And then just this terrible surprise, this shock, this trauma happens that's really out of anybody's control. It just must have been so scary and hard to go through. And how do you feel like that moment had an impact on your life and how you thought and experienced life after that?
It was... I think a memory I have was I took my shoes off and I was running because I didn't have my license or something. I need something from the house, and we didn't live far from the hospital. So I took my shoes off and I got out of the hospital and I ran to the apartment barefoot. And I remember just taking lungfuls of air. This massive lungfuls of air, and I felt like I was breathing for my son Max. We had named him Max. We hadn't named him Max at this moment. He had been he was with the trauma, like the normal things that you do, the naming of him. It's just there was delay, just right. Like trying to do those normal processes of what's the baby's name. So he was baby boy for I think 3 days.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah.
You had a lot of other more important things on your mind.
But, well, you're just kind of, you're just in shock. That's the only way to put it. You're just in shock, this prolonged shock. And you're surviving. You're in survival mode. And I ended up getting sick. I kind of got to a point that I got probably pneumonia. It's hard to say. When you just hang out in a hospital, you get sick. It just happens.
Yeah.
So, it was...
Not many healthy people go to hospitals, typically.
No, you just pick stuff up. Because when you get stressed out, you get stressed and you're more or less doing life support in one sense. Because I was being... like both of us, we were both just holding space for our child to feel like, okay... like you're in this family, because he was just kind of between worlds his whole life.
That's an interesting statement. He was between worlds.
Yeah.
Was that his whole life or just that first moment?
His whole life. Absolutely. His whole life he was in between worlds. I never felt like Max was profoundly interested in this reality. I never felt like he was that terribly interested. I felt like he always had his base and grounding. And that's, in our relationship, I think that was what was most impactful, is he had a whole world he was tuned into that he was really tuned into. And then this was almost like a little sideshow that he had going, because it was just his whatever he was cognizant of, I think was stressful and confusing to a degree, as far as what he could experience. I always looked at his eyes and felt like whatever he was seeing out of his eyes was disturbing to a degree. Like his vision just bothered him.
Mm-hmm.
So he spent a lot of time with his eyes closed. And then when he wanted to focus on you, he would focus directly upon you with his temple, like the side of his head. And that was his point of focus. And then he would lift his right hand and he would hold it at an angle. And then kind of between his right hand and his temple, those were the areas. And then his ear was right there in that mix. So I felt like he would have a strong ear that he really listened with when he really wanted to focus.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense when you lose one sense, other ones become stronger. And
Absolutely.
he must have been very in tune with his hearing and your voice. So he's laying on, what was her name, Christina?
Christine.
Christine, He's laying on Christine's chest. You said that he was this shocking color.
Yeah.
Were you seeing him breathe? Was he gaining his color back? What happened at that moment?
No. It seemed like he was going the other way. But they took him, and I felt like it was really good because they put him right on her chest. But at the same time, I had this feeling like there's an intervention that needs to happen. I don't know what it is, but there was the obstetrician, I think, OB. I think I'm getting that right. So I'm a little rusty on my terminology. The delivering physician. He was so positive and so just chill and just like, well, almost like, look, there's just things in life that are out of our control. But he was acting. It's just like he wasn't getting pushed. It was just completely at ease. And so he moved him, it felt like a lifetime that he was there, but it was only just seconds. It was just seconds. Like they got what they needed to cut the cord, etc. And then they kind of took him out of my vision and they took him to resuscitate him. And I believe that his physician, the physician we ended up with, was involved in his resuscitation. And so they did whatever they needed to do to get him breathing. And then we didn't touch him for almost 4 days.
Oh my goodness.
Because he was in a plastic box.
Right. Yeah, there's a whole lot of processes that they have to follow to just really try to rehabilitate as much as they can.
And they started this process called cooling, where they took his body temperature down to 92 degrees.
Wow.
And so it's more or less, they found with drowning victims who were in cold water for quite some time that would stall any brain injury, more or less. It would just kind of put you on ice, I guess. So they brought him down to 92 degrees, and he did not like that at all. He was in the weirdest postures. He would stick his arm like he was just trying to get off of this cooling pad. And then after 3 days of being on that cooling pad, then they turned the thing off, and he just relaxed. He was just his whole body was just so relaxed.
It had to have felt like torture to not be able to touch him and hold him for 4 days.
Yeah, but I'd never had a kid, so this was just out of the frying pan into the fire. I've never been a mom. So it was just like that.
So you were just talking about how you left the hospital. It was about a month later. There was a procedure done. How did it go from there?
That was pretty. That was a pretty important procedure for his life, as far as the things that we take for granted, which is eating, putting something in our mouth and eating it. That was not his experience, and so what we did is. We pumped breast milk. Christine was running a breast pump, pumping milk instead of a baby nursing. So she was pumping milk out of herself and then pouring it into this little tube that would go into his G-tube. So it would go right through, it would just bypass the whole mouth region and just go straight into the stomach, if that makes sense. So that was the biggest piece. Just shocking. I think that was kind of the wake up call of this is a very different child and a very different, just like hands on, a very different experience.
Was it like that his whole life?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And initially we had this, what they did in the hospital especially is they had a machine that would slowly pipe the food into his tummy over like a hour or so period of time. And it was just a machine that would just move food into his tummy. And I think probably a lifesaver for nurses in a hospital, but we ended up just doing this bolus feeding, which is just a siphon. You're just siphoning food into his tummy. Really simple. But that was, they gave us all of the equipment. So it's like, here's everything you'll need. And so we tried the one, and it was just, he'd move around at night and pull the thing out, and then the whole bed would be flooded in breast milk. And Christine's like, I spent all this time pumping this milk, and here it's complete, like he's knocked this thing out of his tummy.
And it just drained.
And we're trying to sleep or whatever, and we ditched that thing eventually. And it also made annoying sounds and beeping sounds. And so it got to a state that we figured it out, but I was leaving for like a week at a time to go work for my uncle to do agricultural work. So I'd work for my uncle for a week, and then I would come back. It was just like a week on and a week off because we were in the thick of all of our world, all of our plans had just been shattered, and so it was just survival mode, and it kind of like say, well, how do you make some money to keep this thing running? And that's kind of what I did for a while. And then Christine went to nursing school, and in that phase, I transitioned to being the primary caregiver. And that was a very important. At the time, it was just like, well, this is what I want to do. It's just like, this is what I want to do. And whether that was fair to Christine or not, she seemed like she was totally on board with, I want to go to nursing school and pursue this profession. And that was an enormous decision, a huge life-changing decision. So I got to do 7.5 years as a stay-at-home mom. And I wasn't out as a woman at that time. I was living as a man because I didn't really have an understanding that I was a woman. It wasn't something that I was just cognizant of until recently. And I'm still just pretty blasé about my pronouns, etc. I have the way that I present myself, which is a female, but since the world doesn't really have evidence for that, they don't say, well, you don't really look like a woman, so that's the deal. Generally, I get male pronouns. And
yeah, I think I've used them today and always have too, so.
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
I mean, if you can switch to female pronouns, then do it. But if you can't, who cares? Other people feel differently.
So did that 7.5 years really... you're taking care of your son that is 100% dependent on you to survive. How did you develop over the 7.5 years?
Amazingly. The best 7 years of my life.
Wow, that's a powerful statement.
Yep.
The best 7 years of your life.
Absolutely.
Were with Max.
Cloth diapering for 7.5 years. And between my other two children, I did 10 years in cloth diapers. And it's so many hours of just taking diapers and hanging them out in the sunshine.
Yeah.
Just hours and hours of doing that. I think of all of that, how it just became like a rhythm. It was so beautiful. It's just like the most beautiful storybook you could ever see. And yeah, there's challenges. There's lots of sleepless no moments. Because Max would always be up at 2. And we eventually got night nursing to help support us because he liked to be up at night. It was just the energy of the world was quieter. And so he was so sensitive that he would get so worked up by a lot of energy. And so I think I really slowed down. I just became supremely patient and just slowed way down. But that takes work. It's just polishing, working on yourself.
Yeah, that's definitely a word I would use to describe you as patient. Knowing this experience now really helps me understand where it came from and how you developed it. What other type of attributes do you think you gained and sharpened in those 7 years?
Just moving kind of into just a very different, moving into a very different world, because the gift of disability is all the normalcy of how human societies think to themselves that this is what normal looks like. It all gets thrown out the window. And so I just see images of having a wheelchair carrying bicycle that would fold down in the front, and we could roll that bicycle, roll the wheelchair right up onto the bicycle, and I'd pedal off to school. He went to public school. So I'd pedal off to school with him in his wheelchair. I just think of those routines, and it's just nobody else is doing that.
Right.
There's nobody else bicycling their child in a wheelchair to school.
What a loving act, though. Just I'm thinking through that, and in that moment, and what you were giving him, he was able to do something that he wouldn't have ever been able to do without you offering that. That was an act of love.
And the whole bicycle was purchased basically. I mean, we put some money into it, but a whole community of people we just did an online campaign, and we bought the bicycle was purchased like in I think it was within a day. Basically, when it entered into people's conscious, because so many people looked at it and they're like, we want to help. We want something to do.
What an act of love. It's so beautiful to hear.
I know it, because you look at it and you're just like, what can I do to help? But then it's like, what can you do? It's kind of hard to find that.
Yeah.
And, let's buy Max a bicycle. Boom. Just like that.
And then what that offered to him, did he enjoy those moments? I would
Absolutely.
imagine he did. Those might have been some of his favorite moments in his life, was riding on a bike with his dad.
I think we, I don't know. There's moments I can see. I think sitting quietly by the Skunk River, those are my favorites.
Tell me about that. Take me to that moment.
Just is Sunday, and this is he was probably just about 6. And so I think his peak was around 5 as far as the peak of his lifespan. And perspective gives me, it's hard to tell yourself at the time because you don't know the future. You don't really know the past, but you kind of instinctually have this feeling of shift. And I could feel something shifting, something shifting in a direction. And I just kind of came to this moment. There's just there's nothing to do. There's nothing else that I want to do but just load up the guitar. And Lily was around for that time too. So just head down. We were in...
And that's your second child, Lily?
Yeah, Lily.
Your daughter.
And we just head down and spread out a blanket with some snacks and just sit on the side of the river.
And just live in the moment and remember that moment forever.
And it was just perfect. It was absolutely perfect. That whole valley I remember with just so much, just home, this is home. And it's outdoors, it's just outside and yeah.
So that's your favorite moment of him. Let's shift to, this might be a hard conversation, but when he passed away, he was 7.5 years old is what you said.
Yeah.
How was that? How did that change you?
I see that moment, it was not traumatic like his birth. I think that was the gift of it. It wasn't traumatic. There was intense, like, soul-ripping grief. But he passed away so peacefully. We just started this conversation of, we need to start hospice. I remember when Christine said those words, and she was crying, and it was like, there was a realization. Like, it had snuck up on us. Because he had just been, it's like a volume knob. He'd just been slowly turning it down, down, down. And the hardest part was 3 months before he passed. He was admitted to the hospital, and it was one of those hospital admissions. He was sick, and like nobody would say the words, but it was one of those trips where you were going there not to get well. You were going there because it was headed the other direction. And he almost died in the hospital, but he held on for another 3 months. And it was, I read to him the end of Lord of the Rings, and I just said to myself, like, I've got to finish this book. I have got to read you this book, absolutely. Like, you have to hear this. So we got it done, but I mean, we were reading the Battle of the Pelennor Fields when he was in the hospital. So I'm reading through Theoden's charge. He's just like charging and rallying all of his troops, and they're charging into battle. And that was just like, this is it. This is 100% what's happening. And I would just like lay next to him, and he was in the fetal position. I was just like, it was just the two of us, because Christine is back at the house in labor with my youngest son. And so Max is he's in the hospital with me, and I'm an old hand at the game by now. And just like, I'm a pro at this. And so is she. And so it's like, Emil was born, like, I was going to the hospital door because I had the message to come home. And I picked up the telephone as I had my hand on the door, and Christine's like, it's a boy. And yeah, just like that, because my father had arrived to relieve me at the hospital. And I walked home, and I was just like, this is a special moment. My eldest kid is in the hospital, and Emil is at home, born in the bathroom.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, his grandma delivered him.
Wow.
Yeah, he came so fast that the midwife who was coming would not. She didn't make it.
She couldn't make it in time.
No, it was too fast. He was just like, no. And we had a plan of like, we had a whole like birthing tub, et cetera, et cetera. Everything was, it was all set up. Like we knew what we were doing. And so,
yeah, you had a plan, but
the midwife never even made it because she went into labor so fast. It was
Emil had his own plan.
Yeah, he had his own plan.
He was ready to enter the earth fast.
So Emil, and he's named after his brother. It's Maximilian is Emil's full name, and Maxwell is my eldest. They were alive together for 3 months.
I love that you named your third child after Max.
My first, yeah. Oh, that's a potency of Max's life. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, what a beautiful legacy.
So, I think, for me, I just entered into grief.
I can't imagine the level of grief that, like, I hurt for you just hearing this story, and I'm sure anyone listening as well can feel just the grief that you must have been experiencing. You probably can't put words on it.
No, you can't. And it's so confusing because so many things died for me. Like a whole world died. And it was the end of a marriage at the same time. I can only say that looking all the way back, because I've just like, I don't know how it happens or why it happens, but it's just like the whole thing, it's like a whole building collapse. It was not just that, but it was the end of my life. It was the end of one chapter of my life, and a whole identity that I had just collapsed. It is. It's like there's so many things that happened that just caused. I don't feel like his death was the cause of them. I feel like
maybe a catalyst.
I feel like there was an underlying something that was happening. It's almost like what caused that earthquake to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And there was just an underlying something that happening, just this massive, like a foundation, just an upheaval. Everything just fell apart. And it's taken years for all of that falling apart to just manifest. The manifestation of all that falling apart. And I've just let it happen. I haven't fought it. I haven't spent any time fighting it. I've just let it happen.
I think that's something a lot of people struggle with grief and trauma. They run from it. They hide from it. They bury it.
Mm-hmm.
And you did the opposite of that. You went through it. And you said earlier in this conversation that happiness is just one emotion, sadness, grief, anger, all these emotions, one isn't better than the other. You've said that before to me.
Yeah.
So you were just kind of experiencing this grief for what it was and fully embracing it, or
just allowing myself to experience,
fully allowing it to occur.
But then I was in charge of a funeral. And so there's kind of things that you hide from yourself in one sense, where you have to go through this process of the ceremony of the ending of a person's life. And it was a healing process. It was absolutely a healing process for me because I'd never had power over a funeral before. And just tremendously healing. Absolutely. Completely healing process.
That's wonderful to hear.
Yeah. So funerals for me had always, I looked at in embalming, for example, is there's an embalming fluid that gets pumped into the body. So I'd been to so many funerals where there's an open casket and an embalmed grandfather, mother, great uncle. So I'd been through this and I'd seen all these corpses, embalmed corpses, and it never felt right to me. It never ever felt right. And so I figured out, when I was talking to the funeral home director, then he said, well, we've got a time window. We have to bury him within this period of time if you don't want him embalmed.
Is that like 2 or 3 days?
It was, yeah, it was pretty
quick.
It was pretty quick. It's like, we've got a window to do it. And more or less, I said, I guess we're going to have to embalm him then, because I felt like there was processes that we needed to do that were just not going to fit in that window. So I was kind of reluctantly saying, okay, I guess we can go this route. This is just feeling through what was allowed. So then he comes back and says, well, I kind of figure out what we can do. We can do embalming light is what he said to me. And it basically meant they just pumped him full of water instead of embalming fluid.
That feels a lot better.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, so, that feels a lot. That's a great compromise. I'm glad that he told you that.
I think that there was something. I think there was a amount of whatever he needed to put in it to qualify. So it seems like he watered his solution down to a great. Anyway, it looked like Max, and he said, "Do you want me to glue his lips together?" It's like, just let him be just the way he is right now. I think that was disturbing to certain people because it was just very out of the norm, but I felt like he's so beautiful. And he looks dead. Like I don't want to try to glue his mouth into a smile. I don't
Right.
want that to happen.
I can appreciate that perspective.
That's just, it doesn't feel right to me.
Right.
I don't want that to happen. I want this to be honest, that nope, this is a corpse.
Mm-hmm.
This is 100% a corpse. And he looked amazing. And then we made his call, like my dad and Christine's father and quite a few others. We made a coffin out of cedar, just natural cedar.
You built it?
Yeah. I did not build it. I think
Or you were a part of...
I was there. I hammered some nails into it.
Okay.
For whatever reason, we were using screws, which was a good plan. But I felt like I needed to pound just a nail in here or there. It just felt like felt like I needed to do visceral things. And so when we buried him, I was shoveling dirt. Like it was 10, 15 degrees below zero with a howling wind. It was absolutely achingly cold on top of a hill. And it's just like, I'm shoveling dirt. I absolutely need to get my hand on a shovel and shovel dirt. I need to do that.
Does the cold to this day still remind you of that moment?
I was definitely cold.
So when you're out, the other day you told me you're on the incline and it was, I don't know, sub-0 degrees.
No, I'm great with cold now.
Absolutely.
It doesn't remind me of that moment.
It doesn't, though.
No, that moment is just captured in time. It's timeless. Those are the moments that you never will ever forget. And there's something about letting your body, there's things that you do with your body. You're just like, I absolutely need to do this. I absolutely need to have a shovel in my hand, or I have to burn sage. It was so important for me to burn sage. It felt, because we were about to let his body go down into the earth. You know, we're lowering the casket down, and it was just like, this is it. This is it. So I was burning sage, and we took all the flowers and we put all the flowers right on him. Everyone took flowers, and they brought flowers and they laid it right on his body. So I just wanted him surrounded. I just wanted him surrounded with our love. That's what it is.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, he was absolutely loved. Based off of the story you told me and the emotions that, you still feel to this day.
Yeah.
You did a commendable, beautiful job raising him and taking care of him.
Thank you.
And I absolutely admire and respect you for everything that you did for him. I'm sure that you elevated his life, his quality of life, his experience higher than anybody could have ever guessed he would have had. Because every moment was just filled with love. And it just feels like the most beautiful thing you could have done for him.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was speaking to you a few weeks ago, you mentioned that there was a moment in your life where you were walking in a canyon, I believe. Can you tell that story and how you got to that point in your life, and how that point in your life was?
Say a few more things about this story.
You said that you were going to this canyon to die.
Yeah.
So that moment. So how did you get to that mindset, and how did you leave that place? What did you feel when you left?
I was going there to die. Absolutely.
Where was it?
It's in South Dakota. It's a place called the Badlands.
Okay.
So I was absolutely going there to die.
Why were you going there to die? What was it? This process of losing your son and the grief that you were feeling?
Max and I had been on a pretty unique journey in so many ways, but he introduced me to just a process. I think just a process of understanding, and it's not very linear. There's not really a linearity to it. So I look at all the events, and I see them almost out of their spots, out of their places. But there's something that I kind of knew needed to happen. I didn't know why I needed to do things the way I did. I often had this feeling I had absolutely no idea why I'm still going in one sense, or why I'm still, or who I am. And that's, I think, described as an identity crisis. Like, who am I really? And something, almost like something is shattered in your conception of yourself. Something, and in my opinion, the person that we are can never be damaged. The individual that we are can't ultimately be damaged. And
is it just a growth, constant growth and evolving and experiencing?
I feel like there were things that were getting shattered in my world. Conditioning, like a batch of cookies. We're just moldable like that. We slip into the form that we are placed on the sheet when we're baked. And it's almost like something had been shattered so fundamentally that I was fragmented. I was just a bunch of fragments in one sense. And I think that I could have tried to take all the pieces and tried to put them back together. But I didn't. I just kind of let them go. And so I drove for like 9 hours straight in this tiny little car that I borrowed from my brother. And I drove in this tiny, tiny little capsule all the way out there. And I camped in the Sage Creek campground. And then I just kind of walked out into the wilderness. I set out camp and walked into the wilderness. And it's pretty hard to describe all those experiences, but I came to places where it was heat, like there was a heat just radiating out of the ground. And so I exposed myself. I feel like I was exposing myself to something. It was something I was exposing myself to. And the reason I felt I needed to go there was a family vacation that we had when I was a child. And we were just like on Highway 90. And I looked out and I saw some formations. And there was something calling to me. Something intrinsically powerful calling to me. And it was monumentally powerful. But I'd never been able to do that. I'd never been able to submerge myself in a landscape that had no electricity, it was just completely wild. There's no human, I didn't see another human being. And so I felt like I was getting stabbed with all this grass too. They had this pokey buffalo grass that would just stab me. It was like acupuncture all over my body. And I was walking through this grass and eating sage that was growing wildly. And it was like the exposure, whatever I was exposing myself to, it was like a lethal dose. That's what it felt like. It was like I was taking a lethal dose of the wilderness. It's just like taking a lethal dose of the wild. And there's something almost domestic in me that couldn't survive it. I think of the film, not the film, but the book, The Jungle Book, by Rudyard Kipling. And he has this section about Bagheera telling this story. The Bagheera is the Black Panther. Mm-hmm. And Bagheera says, "Feel here, Mowgli, right by my neck." And right there, and Mowgli feels it, and he says, "That's the mark of a caller. I was raised by humans, which is why I saved your life, because human beings raised me. And so I owe them something. There's something I owe them. But there came a day that I was just in a cage." He said, "There came a day when I realized that I was Bagheera and that I was strong, and I broke the pathetic locks that were on me. I just snapped them. And then I went off into the wilderness to live wild." I think that's something that I think was happening for me. It was almost like there was a certain set of understandings that were not exactly part of me, but were enormously shaping as far as what I could do, who I was, who I am. And I think being male or being known as a man was something that was part of those understandings. It was just like part of this framework that was just, it's reinforced your whole life. You're referred to as he. And somehow, deep in me, I always knew that I wasn't he, that I was she. And I had no language to put that into. I had no ability to form that because it really was an impossibility. It was an impossibility in that world. There was no possibility for me to be she. And in the world I move in today, there's really not a social possibility for me to be she. There's people who talk about it. I hear people talking about it. But ultimately, it seems like I need to take drugs or change my body in some way for the society to recognize and say, okay, you're looking more she these days. But that's just not really something I'm interested in. It's not really something that's for me. But it came to me that fundamental understanding of myself as a woman, that massive fundamental understanding that I'm a woman, was a game changer. It was just a complete game changer. And it took a while for that understanding to mature. Like it was a seed that was maturing. Because it was like an impossible, it was an impossibility for my brain. So it's like I almost had to retrain my brain to a degree to even allow myself to conceptualize myself in those terms. But I certainly remember when I flipped and we were just coming to Colorado. And I remember flipping into something that I felt was a female collective consciousness. I remember when I flipped into that. And it was just unprecedented. I was like, whoa. It's like somehow I'd crossed this barrier. And then I started, like, I would look at my body and I'd surprise myself because my body felt surprising to me. That was crazy. I was like, wow, how's this? Like, what is this? Because I felt surprised by my body. It's like, really? This is allowed? Like, how did this happen? And there came a period that I left the female collective consciousness and I slipped into something else. And I don't know what that is. But once I slipped into that, it was not male, it was not female, it was something else. And it was like a homecoming. It was like all the dust had settled. It's like, boom, oh, here I am. Absolutely. That was very exciting.
So you left the Badlands.
Yeah.
A totally different person.
Yeah, but there was a delay and a lag.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lag. It's just like, it's like taking a lethal dose of poison somehow. And what you're killing can't survive. And so it's been lagged, I think, even to now. I mean, it's still, the effects are still happening. They're still transformative. And I almost feel like the Badlands was irrelevant in one sense. It was like, here is the sage, here's the setting that this experience needs to happen. This is the setting in which it needs to happen. And there's no place on earth that I've ever been to like it. Absolutely none. Like when I'm there, one thing I felt when I was there, I remember it very distinctly. I said, I am from this planet. That was the first time I felt, because it's like I was looking at my wildest dreams come true. I was looking at this countryside, this landscape. I was looking at these formations in the horizon. It's like, I feel like I've dreamed of this my whole life. And I've yearned for this my whole life. I've yearned for it. And somehow I can hear my people here. Somehow I can hear the ancient ones who I belong to. And I speak of ancient because it doesn't feel like, it almost feels like you're an orphan, like you're orphaned in a strange place. And I felt that in my childhood quite a lot. It's like a sense of, I don't belong here. And thankfully I've come to a place of, I belong here.
Yeah. Now let's fast forward to your current mindset, because you have a very contagious personality. It's one filled with positivity, patience, calmness. Uh, just somebody I feel like I could say anything to you and there would be no judgment. There would just be understanding. I remember you came into my house for the first time a while ago, and usually I have two dogs. They're very loud. They bark a lot when new people come in, and usually I have to apologize. I'm sorry. You laid down on the ground and you said, I'm in their home. They're just doing what they need to do. They're protecting their family that they love. And that perspective just kind of shocked me because I thought, well, you're absolutely right. No one has ever had that perspective, though. So the perspective that you have, the outlook that you have, I think is very unique. And it's something that if there was more of that in this world, it would absolutely be a better place. How have you developed from the Badlands where you went to go to die to now this person who appears to love life and is on this beautiful journey? That's quite the switch. How long in time was that? How did the incline help you in that journey as well? Just there's a couple of questions there if you can follow along with those.
Yeah, I can. I think I just let it happen and got out of the way. And it did a lot of processing, just tons and tons of processing. And the judgments or the lack of judgment's something that's interesting to me. Like, we need to make judgments in life. That's something we need to fundamentally do. But there's a kind of judgment that we can make that's something like we're viscerally sending to another person. We're sending something to them. And it is more or less controlling. It's a control mechanism in one sense. It's not exactly like we're trying to control another person, but the judgments we make about another person are ways that we're more or less influencing the world. We're influencing the world by the way we feel. And I think I feel it all. Something about flipping and constantly knowing intuitively that I'm a woman, and the rest of the world constantly feeling like I'm a man. So I'm used to that judgment coming to me all the time. Just absolutely, it's with me all the time. And it's got to a state where it doesn't even register in one sense. Like, I don't even register it. I don't even feel it anymore. Like, there was a period of time that I felt it, or I felt like, no, that's not who I am. And then there came of just a rock solid stability of, I know exactly who I am. And there's absolutely no one else's approval. I need no one's approval. I need no one's acceptance. I need no one's okay, in one sense, if that makes sense. So I think as I've come to that state myself, I've gotten to a state of stability where nothing moves me. And sometimes I feel there's things that will happen that I feel very strongly. And then I just need to center myself more or less. I just need to be calm and center myself, which I am centered. It's just like a wave that crashes up against a shore that's an especially big one. And so you feel it hit when that big wave hits. And you're just like, whoa, that was a big wave. It hit. And then everything settles back, everything settles back down. I think the incline has been a tool, an amazing tool, because the incline has an incredible beauty, and the incline's like a mirror or a measuring stick, and it'll just reveal everything to you. It's like you put yourself up onto it, you put yourself against it, or with it, or whatever your feelings on life, they get exposed. The way you approach life, it gets exposed. So I came to a place on the incline where I became like a schooner, and I just put out my sails, and I let myself be carried up the incline. So I wasn't pushing myself, straining for some time to say, well, what kind of time can I get on this? No, I was just under this feeling, rock solid feeling. And a football coach helped me this, because he was telling his students something that's pretty prevalent in that community, is like, your body's going to be, more or less, don't listen to your body. I think that was his message, was mind over matter. He was saying mind over matter. And he's like, you can push yourself beyond what your body's stronger than you think, in one sense. He was saying, just push through it.
Very true.
Very much push through it. And at the time, I was pretty troubled, because I was seeing so much head injury in the sport, so much head trauma. And I was seeing that philosophy, almost like, this is the philosophy that's making this head trauma, is when a player is at that state. Now, I would never say that the philosophy's I was just seeing connections being made, almost like you are disposable. That was a message I was getting. It was just almost like your body's disposable and it can be used. And I don't know if he really meant that or not, but it was resonating with me so strongly. And I was seeing this image of Walter Payton, who built himself his own training grounds, so he could say, I'm taking myself to the absolute limit of what I can do. And so there's a lot of maturing that I was seeing in this, and I was thinking, just almost as a mirror to myself, because I think that philosophy probably has a lot of merit from one perspective. But I was just seeing the difference to the way I was behaving. And the difference that I was finding was, I had a fundamental belief that my body wanted to be strong and that it wanted to be the best. So it was like my whole being was in unity of what it wanted. And so I had a different approach. And that approach is what I was listening to. I was just letting my body, as far as my body, dictate. And I think in an older generation, that would be viewed as lazy in one sense, like you're not driving yourself, or pushing yourself beyond. But I was feeling like, if I'm driving myself, I'm going to push myself to injuries. Like, I'm going to get injured out here. And I don't want to get injured out here. I'm not interested in injury. So that's what I was feeling. And the thing that I saw with that was this essential understanding of almost like somehow your body is weak. Somehow your body doesn't want to be strong. And I would never really put that in someone else's mouth, but that was something that was coming to me just in my experience, was, oh, this is something that I think I've been believing just from my molding as a kid, that somehow you are weak, somehow you're not strong, somehow there's an imbalance or imperfection in the being who you are. And these messages create who we are. They create their fundamental understandings, or I am tired, or someone else saying to me, it looks like you're tired. Well, I may not be tired, but they're things that they're almost like commands. Okay, I'm tired now. It's almost like these commands that you tell your whole physiology, like, this is what you are. And so that, I think, was what was being exposed, is there was a massive amount of understanding of these concepts, these things, these moldings, these shapings from your childhood. You carry them. They're just baked into the pie. So the incline was exposing those things to me. And so I more or less was just letting them be exposed and realizing, oh, that doesn't serve me at all. It's a complete disservice. You're placing a limitation on what I can or can't be. And then you remove, it's like a governor on a motor. Like, well, this thing can only rev so high. It's these parameters we place on ourselves. And so what I'm saying is really, what are the parameters? What can I do? What can I do with my body? And it's just with this feeling of, my body wants to be strong, and it wants to be nourished, and it wants to be amazing. So I just say, well, get out of the way and let it happen. And then it's just a behavior set. All right, what are the behaviors I'm choosing? And then focus about how's this part of my body, just listening to the feedback. So you're moving to a very receptive model where you're just listening very carefully to what your body feels. And Iron Spring has been prevalent through all of that because it's more or less become my blood supply, if you think of it that way.
Yeah, I like that metaphor.
Yeah.
Well, that's really interesting to hear. I have 15 minutes before I need to get up and help with dinner
Absolutely.
with the kids. I think that a big part of you is music.
Yeah.
I mean, I could literally talk to you all day. You have such
Absolutely.
amazing stories. But we do need to, I want to focus a little bit on your music.
Mm-hmm.
I want to hear you. I want to record you, play
Yeah.
a song. You can play anything that you want. Most of our conversation was centered around Max. Do you have anything that kind of reminds you of him, or
Yeah.
the energy that he put off? And
Absolutely.
so, maybe something like that would be
Mm-hmm.
appropriate for this recording.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the focus of the conversation.
Yeah. So I would love to show people the talent that you have, because you are really good. I love your music.
Well, this is a pretty new song in one sense. It's a song that I named after him, and it's written for an asteroid called Vesta. Vesta orbits between Mars and Jupiter in the asteroid belt. I've written albums, two different albums for our solar system, and those are just heavily influenced by the work of Gustav Holst, and just an absolute incredible influence in the symphony. He wrote The Planets, and that's always stuck with me. That he wrote for the planets. And when I heard the music that he wrote for the planets, I heard every single one of them just, yes, that's exactly like that planet. And that's always stuck with me. And so when I started writing this project, that's what I was writing for, the planets. It was like, we need more of this. Absolutely. We need more songs for these planets. So this song is written for an asteroid called Vesta. And to me, naming a song for Max after an asteroid is really poetic, because people generally, we look at the big ones and it's hard for us to focus on something like the asteroids. It's just, it's just a rock floating in space, right? So,
And they just pass by quickly.
Yeah, but
and they're here, and
they're so important to the evolution of this planet. And because they are complete game changers. If you look at the geology of the planet, they're complete game changers.
Absolutely.
For the whole planet when an asteroid contacts. And it happens all the time, but most of them are just so small that it doesn't register. The big ones are the ones that really shift things around. Anyway, and that's what I'll play for.
I love that. That's beautiful. We'll pause here and we'll get the mic set up. Okay, we are on. You can start whenever you'd like.
This is a song for an asteroid orbiting between Jupiter and Mars in the asteroid belt, and it's an asteroid called Vesta. I named this song Max after my firstborn child. All my albums are named after different children I've met, children that I haven't met. That's also important to me. And that's something I love about children. Children just have this magic that's just, it glows in them. There's this magical glow that comes out of children, and it's just the purity of the soul shining through. Anyway, this is a song called Max. Sailing far still, Riding soft windows, seldom fails you see veils, riding seamless too. All in found this side, beyond this fair. Heading on long. Hiding shield and violent soul. I'm in those violent two. Balance and violence. Sail on this. She only violence soul. Balance and silence survive. Yelling's silver on this fire, only silver and vine and only spring. Shivering down angels, burning silver and vine you. I didn't know this feeling long. While it's sail on, right into this song. You lying there, said you know. Torn soul, falling juice fell in a vase, while lonely shell and violent told you don't do it. She all night. falling sound. Sail on the sail, on to the stairs, sailing on their nose, paddling on the veil, falling to seven, she falling sailed on and down. They'll on to sail, darling, just fell loose. Sail on, just sail on, feel sail on. Possible, possible, fighting too long, is that falling into vast. Oh, the sail fellows, Ellen too. Ellen on this phone, I civil, just feel like to el so you learn to survive your own, feel lonely, battle to fall to sail into a world. Sailing to Seville instead. Sail along this flight to fell on fast shore. Falling so falling so
Wow, Mikael, you are so talented. That was absolutely beautiful. What did you think, Dylan? Talking to the mic. Did you like it? He's nodding his head.
Nodding in approval.
Yeah. Just such a beautiful song that you dedicated to your son. Mm-hmm. I felt the love in that song. Mm-hmm. And just, you're so impressive. You're an impressive person.
Thank you.
I think we all could learn a lot from you, and I feel so grateful. And I feel very lucky that you chose to have this conversation with me. Yeah. So I'm glad that you're in my life. I'm glad we met. Thanks for spending the time and sharing your story. I think that it's going to move a lot of people.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Be well.